quick question before we start. Have you ever desperately craved social connection, made the plans, counted down to them, and then felt an overwhelming urge to cancel the moment it was time to leave the house? Yeah, then you're in the right place. You're listening to the Spacious Brain podcast, where real neurodivergent humans with real jobs and real daily chaos overshare with pride. Minus the glossy, my ADHD is my superpower nonsense. Hi, I'm Noemi, a scientist, a neurodiversity coach. Yes, someone who will absolutely derail into a story from when I was 12 because I'm ADHD and tangents are my love language. If you ever felt alone or felt like the Temu version of neurodivergent because you're not an entrepreneur, not a CEO, and you forget to eat and drink on the same day, you're in the right place. Let's keep this real. In today's episode, I'm joined by Stephen for a conversation that is honest, layered, and deeply human. We talk about what it means to live with AuDHD, particularly when diagnosis comes later in life, and how that understanding can reshape the way you see your past, your relationships, and yourself. Hello, Stephen. Thank you so much for being with us today. I'll start with the usual opening question. Who is Stephen?
Who is Stephen? I'll try and give the abridged version. Stephen is 45 years old. He's a specialist geoenvironmental engineer, double chartered, and he is late diagnosed autistic ADHD with a bit of dyspraxia thrown in for good measure.
Thank you for sharing it. It gives us a taster of what's to come, which then brings me to my next question. What brought you to seek a diagnosis, and particularly two different ones, because you had to go through the initial ADHD diagnosis and then to get the second one?
So back in 2023, I was chair of my golf club, and it was quite a stressful situation. And I started having all these weird feelings. And I was remembering being a child, and it was like I started investigating it, and it's like I always knew it was ADHD, but I always thought you couldn't be diagnosed as an adult with ADHD because that is what it used to be like. And I'd never really looked into the world of neurodiversity until the winter of 23, 24. So things just started stressing me out. And it's like, why am I having a memory of being 8 years old or 13 years old? And it was really bizarre. I just started thinking, and then I did an online test for ADHD, and it was like, yeah, of course you're ADHD, please seek help. And then on it, it said about autism, and something in my brain just went, have a little test of it. And it's like, interesting. Okay. And then you start scrambling around for information. Basically, explained the push-pull that I had in my head, where I'd want to go out, but I don't want to go out. And it was always weird. And I always had this contradiction and conflict inside. And I went to the GP. GP asked me to do these tests again. And then he referred me, and I asked for both ADHD and autism in March 24. I got referred to Psychiatry UK for the autism one, and then the ADHD one wasn't done until August because the GP, in his wise wisdom, decided that I was only needed one. And I was like, no, I don't just need one, I need both. And then eventually, once everything settled down, I asked Psychiatry UK, and he said 2 years to wait for the autism and 7 years for the ADHD. And this was in the summer of 2024. September-ish, and I was like, okay. And then this post on LinkedIn came up about dual assessments, and my brain just went, right, okay, right, let's get in order, right, investigate. And it was like, if I could get both done, I don't have to wait 2 years and 7 years. I can get everything done and dusted. The only problem was cost. Then I had to take out a loan. I thought it was a price worth paying for myself to have that clarity of being believed that, for 44 years, I'd not been believed, or I was always odd, always felt different. People treated me, in a certain way that I think every neurodivergent person can relate to who's late diagnosed, is that you have communication issues and all those incidences. It just took the loan out, and from commission to the getting my report was all done and dusted in 6 weeks. So you can imagine the relief of getting the diagnosis. It was like, okay, I'm validating myself. And I know that a lot of people can self identify, but for my brain, I can't wait because I will be in rumination mode. It will actually eat away at me. So I had to get the diagnosis because at some point in my life, I thought I'm going to need that piece of paper because there's organizations and systems that won't help unless you have that piece of paper. I don't think I'm quite had that situation yet, but that's why I really needed the diagnosis. I needed to know for certain that I was autistic and ADHD because uncertainty is my kryptonite. If I have any degree of uncertainty, it absolutely cripples me. I can't deal with masses of uncertainty. I can deal with little bits here and there, but when they start to accumulate, that's when it starts to get really stressful and my brain just implodes if I don't deal with it and get some certainty.
I really relate to what you shared, and not just about the uncertainty being your kryptonite, but the part about choosing to pursue a private diagnosis and seeing it as an investment in yourself. But you were able to do that because of your position and your career. And a lot of people don't have that option, especially in a system that isn't designed for adults seeking diagnosis. When you look at the adult diagnostic process, from the waiting list to the lack of provision and the pushback from government, what do you think the long term consequences have been for undiagnosed generations and for public health overall?
Because of my determination and perseverance, I think I've had this since I was in the womb. The desire just exists and just to try and make sure that I can get through. And so I'm lucky that I've had that. But for other people that don't have that determination and perseverance, it's horrible. The whole system is like there's 2 or 3 generations of people that have gone undiagnosed, in the main, end up with poor mental health, poor well-being, an absolute drain on the NHS because they don't actually treat what the root cause is. And for me, I've always been my brain's always worked in root cause analysis. So, like, the diagnosis process for adults is non-existent, and you can tell that by the amount of people that are on the waiting list, the length of time that you've got to wait. Uh, it's just absolutely ridiculous. And then you've got people who are basically saying it's overdiagnosed, and it's like, no, it's increased awareness. As I've just said, there's 3 generations of people. Like my granddad used to collect stuff and keep it in jars like screws and stuff, all in size order and stuff. And he worked as a security guard when he left the army. He just went on his own, just in his little building. He was blatantly autistic, but he had a violent temper, and I can understand why that violent temper was there now because, he didn't understand that he was autistic and he went to his grave not knowing that. And it's likely that my dad as well is autistic and ADHD because of the things that he's done in the past. Do you know what the hardest thing is? Is convincing people like Wes Streeting and other people in government that this is an actual thing that we've been neglected. They're making it worse by not acknowledging us, that we have been abandoned. The entire of humanity is born neurodiverse. Every invention, every time we've evolved as a species from when we left the primordial soup, when we climbed into the trees, that's all been because of neurodiversity, because somebody or something thought differently. If you look at it in that lens, you can clearly see neurodiversity everywhere because without neurodiversity, we wouldn't have evolved as a species. Sorry, that was a bit deep.
This is what I love about deep conversation, the fact that they invite reflection. So it's amazing. And I really appreciate you sharing your family history. For those of us who go many years without a diagnosis, it can feel like we're suddenly asked to revisit our entire past and see through a new lens. What was that experience like for you?
Oh my God. It was like hitting a wall. So the moment I realized I was autistic and ADHD, my mask just fell. I was absolutely exhausted, and I can look back now and just see how exhausted I was, and it was just like months and months and months, and I still occasionally get them now, trauma and grief reflections. So I didn't realize that how much grief and how much trauma I had. I did reference before about going back to incidences when I was younger, and I just recalled all these conversations with old work jobs or school, and it was just like, "Oh my God, what's happening?" But thankfully, at work, we have a EAP, but they only have 8 sessions. So I managed to find a counselor through that, did my 8 sessions, and then I retained her, paid for her privately, and she's been great because she worked in a SEND background, so she understood neurodiversity, and it was great, and it was much needed. This is why I think a lot of people don't wanna go down the route of understanding the neurodiversity, and if they do, they haven't got the help because you need a support network around you, and I know that when I told everybody close to me, it was kind of like, "Oh, yeah, that's kind of obvious," or, "You're just Steve." They were the 2, like, general answers. As I explored it more and I talk about it more, I just hope other people can understand that, I've not been an arse. I'm just overwhelmed. I didn't even know about my emotions and feelings until last August. And somebody had to explain that to me, and it was like we were going through, okay, so I have this little ball of the flight, and it feels like a spinning ball inside my chest, and I can feel that spin up and intensify, and like actually knowing it's there can help me now understand, try and limit and manage the overwhelmingness. And I think this is what people need. And I think if we had better support for these adults that are going through massive trauma. It is a massive trauma going through it, and those that want to do it but are fearful, they need this support. And counselling has been really good to deal with the trauma and the grief and explain it. The first session I was absolutely in tears at the end of it because she was like, "You do realise you were emotionally and physically abused."
Wow. And that's heavy.
The physical was a bit of a shock because I was so used to being smacked as a kid because I was running around, generally would be considered like naughty back in the 80s, just wouldn't listen and do anything. So get my pants pulled down in the middle of a supermarket or whatever shop and get my ass hit. So, yeah, and then clip round the head. There was one time when I got a bar of soap in my mouth for swearing, and I was about 3, 4, something like that, and I bit it in half and spat it out. And then after that, it went to washing up liquid because I would just repeat the word. But you look back now, and it's kind of like, oh my God, yeah. But for me, growing up and not realizing that without the counseling and talking through it, then I wouldn't be in a situation now where I have probably the best mental health I have. Despite ongoing challenges in my life, I actually mentally unloading myself and going through that post-diagnosis has been able to let me be more authentic to myself. And the 2 key things is being kind to myself, which I never was. I was always my own worst critic, and stop people pleasing because I always people please because there was this need to feel validated for and make sure people were okay. And I didn't like conflict. So I did a lot of people pleasing. And I realized how exhausting that was for 44 years.
So, how do you feel now? And do you think there is anything that helped you apart from counseling?
So I think me after the diagnosis, it's the best thing I ever did, the best money I've ever spent on myself. And I've wasted a lot of money in my life from being neurodivergent. So, yeah, I think that was the wisest decision. But there was also the emotional intelligence course that I did in May 2020. That was a stepping stone. And then doing mental health first aid training in October 2022. Without those 2 stepping stones, I wouldn't have been able to get to the conclusion of being autistic and ADHD because they prepared me to understand my brain. It wasn't a crash landing. It was if I look back, it was kind of a gentle, okay, well, plant this in his head, we'll let it ruminate for a bit, and then we'll move on to something else.
How do you feel about your diagnosis?
A lot of people see it as a label. I don't see it as a label. I see it as an identity. And if you've lived your life in a lie and masking, then having that identity and then being able to connect to a community. And do you know what? I found hundreds of people out there. I don't feel alone anymore. That's the main thing. After the diagnosis, I always felt alone. Now I know that there's people out there like me, similar to me, and you know what? I can just chat to them freely, and it's really good because once you know, speaking to fellow neurodivergents, it's like you can just tell, and then you can just talk. So yeah, it's been a long 18 months, but do you know what? It's worth it. And I think if the NHS could take examples from me and other people within the neurodiversity community, and then try and tailor some sort of package to try and help people from a younger age, actually might save the NHS a bit of money in old age.
I absolutely agree. A lot of money, not just some money. But what you're describing really highlights the long term cost of not understanding yourself. And you talked about struggling with your mental health, starting with the emotional regulation, and then spilling into other areas of life, including financial decisions that, in hindsight, were linked to traits you didn't yet understand. And sitting here with you now, you're clearly someone who's built stability. You're good at what you do, you're successful in your field, and in many ways, you're one of the fortunate ones. But there are so many undiagnosed people who don't have that stability. And without the tools to understand or manage those traits, that level of overwhelm can spiral in really damaging ways. So, I guess the question for you is, when you look back over your life, do you think having an earlier diagnosis would have changed the direction of your journey? And if so, how?
Yes, I think it certainly would, and I've reflected on if I'd known earlier, but then I wouldn't be the person I am today. So it's sort of like a paradox. So I would, I'd be a completely different person with different experiences and gone. But the thing is, society still wouldn't have accepted me back 20, 30 years ago. They would have probably put me in some sort of special measures area, because how restrictive it was back in the 80s and I think I would have been shunned. I think it would have actually been worse knowing knowing back then the way the system is, because the systems that we have are not made to be accepting for people that are different. Anybody that challenges the norm, whether you're in work or society, always end up hitting barriers. So I don't think I think the timing is right for me, and I don't think, of course, it would have changed my life, but I don't know how it would have changed it. I think actually it might have ended up being worse, because one of the things that I had undiagnosed was I saw the path and the door to suicide several times in dark moments. I reckon that I might have taken that option. I think if I'd grown up in the 80s or 90s with a diagnosis, the way it's happened has happened, and I don't think I would wanna go back and have a yeah, I feel sorry for younger Steve, but I don't think a diagnosis would have helped him.
What would you say to younger Steve today? Now that you know everything that you know and that you lived the life that you lived, what would you say to him? What could help him?
I would say everything is gonna be okay, just try to be a little less impulsive. That's what got me in trouble a lot along the way, was being impulsive and stuff. So between the ages of 18 and 23, what I call my wilderness years, where I just drifted from degree to degree, first year to first year, accumulated loads of debt, then just woke up one day at 23 and went, "Oh, maybe I should sort my life out." And then my life started at 23. I say, when I went to uni at Liverpool. So I think everything would be all right.
I want to stay for a moment on the traits. We touched briefly on some of the traits, and you just mentioned the impulsivity. What is one trait that you really, really struggle with? And what is, on the contrary, one trait that you really love?
I don't like the rumination. I Something gets in my head, it just sits there and I have to deal with it. And sometimes it's very difficult to have conversations with people and communicate it. So when I get into that mode, I tend to like to write it down and express it through writing, because the amount of times I've been gaslit or just trodden on when I've had an idea or want to express something basically makes me retreat into my head and then do it via writing, because when somebody doesn't listen to me or try and understand, it can get very emotional. So then it ruminates and it just won't go away. And that goes for both personal and workplace, because as we know, workplaces are very slow at acknowledging neurodiversity. There's some great companies, my company as well, that are making the steps, but they go at glacial pace, where the neurodiversity world is outstripping every system, every every institution in this country. We're outstripping it with knowledge. It is going so quickly that nobody can keep up with it. So I have to remind myself about that sometimes. Yeah, that rumination. If I could manage that, that would be great. That the trait that I love, the intense focus on special interests. So I love my golf. I discovered it in 2019, and I look back now and I got my first handicap of 29 in January 2020. I've been as low as 9.3 this year, and I've just really determined to get as good as I can, because it's like starting as a 39-year-old at aging Marcus with other hidden disabilities is really challenging to pick it up. And also discovering I had dyspraxia means that I understood why I found God so technically challenging with the moves and stuff. So, like, my determination, my perseverance, and my hyper focus on my special interests, you know, really, really helped. So, I also like. Do you know what I like? The humanity. Do you know what? This is very relevant in the last few months. The amount of humanity that it gives me, to help other people. I have this. I've always had this uncontrollable desire to help people, you know, and some people don't want help and stuff, but it gives me a lot of love to help people. And this is why I want to tell my story and my side. Is that anybody listening, watching, in conversation, I've had people tell me that they don't acknowledge anything I say I do, but then contact me outside of it to say, keep doing it. We are listening. And that's quite hard to deal with. So that goes back into the struggle traits. Yeah, I think, actually understanding the traits. So I know I've got rejection sensitivity. That caused a lot of issues, because I was always called, excuse the language, a pussy. Grow up, man up. That sort of, and I was like, but I didn't feel like wanted to do that. So I'm learning that rejection sensitivity side and managing that, and I'm able to take criticism, suggestions, bad news a lot better now, because I understand what it's coming from. Justice sensitivity as well. I love that. And I love an underdog, because I've been an underdog my entire life. So I'm always looking out for the other people, and trying to help people in my own way, that by just talking to them, listening to them. So, yeah, I'm just trying to think, what else do I like? Oh, the other one, task switching. I hate task switching. That is, so I used to do field work, so I'd be outside, and then I'd come in the office in the afternoon, and I always feel like this weird body sensation, and I'm always tired. And now I look back and it's like, "Oh, that makes sense, because task switching, different environments, and I couldn't get myself into office mode." Uh, so yeah, I think, do you know what? Like, I'm learning to love all my traits. I do struggle with them, but I'm managing them. Again, I'm doing that challenge thing where people say, "Oh, maybe you should use meds." It's like, no, do you know what? I think I'm going to go this way, while other people go that way. I'll go against the grain, and I'll try and manage it. And I think for me, it would just harm part of me if I did take meds. So yeah, I think that's why I love all my traits, but I'm learning about them all the time. So I don't think I'll ever and understanding each trait.
What really strikes me about receiving a diagnosis later in life is how it can become a process of rediscovery. You start to understand yourself in ways you perhaps haven't for many years. And that often brings a level of self acceptance and self compassion that wasn't there before. From what I hear, that's a shared experience for many people diagnosed later in life. And it's incredibly powerful. And at the same time, it can feel overwhelming because the rediscovering yourself isn't always easy, but it can be deeply affirming. Alongside that, many people begin to take their boundaries more seriously, often for the first time. And that's something I've really noticed in your story, especially having spoken with you before, and the more I hear it, the clearer it becomes. You also touched briefly on workplaces earlier, which leads me to my next question. Did you choose to disclose your diagnosis at work? And how did you navigate that decision?
Yep, as soon as I got it, I actually before I'd even got the diagnosis, when I said I think I'm neurodiverse, I disclosed it because I have to work with people, and going through it's emotional. I already have several other health issues that contribute to fatigue. I've got no testosterone, I've got celiac disease, I've got a B12 deficiency, I fluctuate in and out with anemia, I've got secondary polycythemia. What else have I got? Gastric reflux, uh, soy and dairy allergy. So I've got a lot going on. So the thing is, adding autism, ADHD, and dyspraxia, all of a sudden, things are going to change. So I wanted to let people that I work with, my manager and my team, that I am going through something. I don't know what the end's going to be. And the thing is, historically, we would have hid this, but after reading so many books on neurodiversity, which actually came out at a good time in early 2024, there was a lot of good books coming out. And then following people like Ellie Middleton and Leanne Maskell, and just seeing how vocal they were, just like, well, do you know what? I'm too old to like hide and mask anymore. And it's like, I'm telling you what's happening to me. If you choose to either acknowledge it, and the thing is, I'm protecting myself. So by disclosing it, I'm protecting myself, and we're in the process of trying to change the culture, improve well-being and mental health. Still a long way to go, for every company, but my company is a little bit further ahead than most, but they are still so far behind where I am and what needs to be done to help people. So, yeah, I think the funny thing was the D&I manager said to me, "Oh, early March 24. Oh, what reasonable adjustments do you need?" I was like, "I ain't got a fucking clue. I ain't got a clue. I don't know." And it was like, it was the first time I've really heard about it. So it wasn't until July, because I already had like working 8 till 4, with a bit of flexibility for appointments and stuff. So that was already in place. And then I ended up getting Grammarly, because I realized that my brain always leaves out like twos, a lot of the little words that I don't know why it does it. It's always been there. So I ended up getting Grammarly. So that they were my reasonable adjustments and stuff. So do you know what? It was okay. I know other people with other managers in the company struggle. We have got a neurodiversity support circle, which we set up last summer. So I'm the lead on that. And we started off with 4 people. A couple of those original 4 have left for other jobs, but we're up to 40 people, a mixture of parents, people that are listening and watching, but not engaging. So there's people with kids, and, they're having their own journeys. So I think, 2026 is going to be interesting where I'm working, and for other companies with the employment rights bill and stuff that's coming out. It's going to be interesting. I think workplaces need to be, they need to be more flexible, more human. That's based, and the understanding that each individual has a different need. And the thing is, it needs to start at the top with people acknowledging this and then filtering it down to managers. Do you know what? We don't bite. You just need to listen to us and ask us, what do we need? Most of the time, it's quite simple. So yeah, it's you know what? It's as simple as that. Just speak to us. We don't bite. And I think as some people fear asking questions or whatnot because they're afraid of getting it wrong. And I think that's actually makes it worse from my viewpoint, is no, I'm talking openly about it. That's an invitation to ask questions. And I think the sooner people understand that we don't bite, the easier it can be for people to stay in work. Because I know neurodivergent people, especially autistic people and ADHD people, end up being unemployed because of this lack of understanding within the workplace. You know, one year I had 4 jobs in between jobs.
What type of jobs?
Well, they were working in my industry. It was just different companies and the fit wasn't right, or I started and then the job that I applied for got reopened and then I got re-interviewed. So I've been at my current company for 4 years. So it was 2021, at the end of 2020 and the end of 2021, I had 4 jobs. I think one lasted 3 weeks, one lasted 4 weeks, and one lasted about 8, 9 months. So, yeah, it was basically I didn't fit in, and I knew I didn't fit in. It's kind of funny. I'm just gonna just digress slightly. When I was younger and at uni and stuff, relationships with girls would only last 3 to 6 weeks because then I'd be like, "Yeah, you're not the one," and it was very similar with jobs. It's like I know if it's the right fit or not.
How did you recognize when a workplace wasn't the right fit for you? And what felt different emotionally or practically when you found the company that was the right fit?
So there were the jobs. Actually, all three of them that I went and jumped out of. Vibe. A lot of neurodivergent people say that they have like this vibe, and I've always had this gut instinct, and I'm beginning to understand that it's actually my brain protecting me, and that's what that sixth sense is. So like I've called my spidey senses, and it's sort of like you just get this feeling, and it's just like yeah, red flags. And I look back now, as you asked me that question, I'm looking back, and when I see the red flags, it's kind of like, okay, and then I just go, okay, and then once I've made a decision, that's it. I can't go back on that decision, and it's just like it's just the vibe of the people that you're working with and the setup of the company. I didn't feel like I fitted in. On one of them, they were trying to get me to do something that I was like not comfortable with, and it was like, no, I'm not doing that. And then because of demand avoidance, they kept saying, you are going to do it this way. You are going to do it this way. It was like, no, I'm not. Here's my resignation email.
What changes in the workplace do you think would have the greatest impact? And what should managers be doing differently? Or what should executives and CEOs be prioritizing at a strategic level?
So I've suggested this at my own company, but basically companies need somebody that's neurodiverse who understands and can act as a bridge between employees and managers and the CEOs because everybody needs to be educated and learn about the diversity of the human brain because we've been brainwashed by church and state and now capitalism for a long time because we all have to conform so we can be controlled. And this is why workplaces are finding it difficult because they still have this adage of special treatment for people. And it's like, no, it's just being flexible so that you can get people to thrive. And obviously, since Brexit, we have an immigration agenda within the UK. So we've got to try and help the people that are in Britain be able to fill the jobs that used to be filled by people and immigrants. And, you know, if we can educate our kids, it needs to start at school. The school system needs to change. We need to nurture people into areas that they want to do. So, you know, I remember subjects at school. I didn't particularly enjoy physics, but I tolerate. But I could see other people who are looking back now were clearly ADHD, and it's like they've got no interest in a subject like physics whatsoever. They're never going to use it. They want to do something more practical. So why not nurture people and encourage them and take their strengths? Because we've always been at a deficit. You know, what are they lacking? And it's like, well, let's play to people's strengths. If we play to people's strengths, then workplaces can thrive more and have you know, it costs a lot of money to replace staff. So if you can try and be a bit more flexible, and build that community within work. You don't have to have that high staff turnover.
We spoke a lot about the reasonable adjustment, and there are a lot, that you could choose from, and sometimes you don't even know what you need. But in your opinion, what could be one that could be universal or could be applied to everyone that could help so many? What would it be?
That's the easiest question ever. Flexibility. It's trust your staff to be flexible. And the thing is, some people want to work late in the evening, around other stuff. This 9 till 5 malarkey, whatever, it's dead. Some people thrive in the morning, some in the afternoon. Just let the flexibility go. It's not just for neurodivergent people, but every single brain type. It would work for everybody.
I'm going to slightly change the subject for a second. You mentioned earlier that you're navigating some significant life changes at the moment, and with that comes a lot of pressure and a lot of emotion. In the midst of everything that's going on, how do you regulate yourself? What helps you stay grounded and anchored?
So I did work up until the 4th of December, because my wife's seriously ill and after a kidney transplant. So I was working till the 4th, but then there was a few issues within work, which I won't get into. So I took sick leave. I would have liked to carry on working with the flexibility because that's part of my routine. So that helps me regulate. I need my routines. So now at the moment, the only thing that's regulating me is walking my dogs, playing golf when the weather allows. Because I didn't realize this, but I've realized this year how much just going and playing golf helps me switch off from everything. And I can just try and get that little ball from A to B 18 times. It's really good for me. And I think, we all go through major life events. And if you're neurodivergent, it can be even harder because we don't have that ability to understand our feelings and emotions. And so it can be overwhelming and your stress bucket can get overloaded quite quickly. So I'm on the sick at the moment to try and regulate myself, and I'm just waiting and seeing what's happening to try and regulate myself. Like, last night I stayed up till 2 a.m. playing Warhammer. There was another thing to help me regulate where I just get into into a world of, beasts and men, and that just helps me take my time away. So, yeah, I try and look after myself because everybody keeps saying to me, "Look after yourself," and I am doing this. This is the difference between this life event and the last life events that's happened with my wife is I ended up like previously drinking lots, gambling lots, making silly decisions, not knowing that that's what was up was the lack of emotional understanding. So this time I feel quite calm. My mental health, despite all the rubbish going on, my mental health is really good. I've realized now that I can tell the difference between my physical, emotional, and mental states. So I can separate the three out. That is probably one of the biggest learning things I've learned. Physically, I feel okay. I can sort of feel a frog in my throat over the last 6 weeks, but physically, I'm okay. Mentally, it's draining, but I'm okay. If I had to say physically on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being really good, 1 being rubbish, I'd say physically I feel around 5 or 6. Mentally, I probably feel around 5, 6 again, but emotionally, I'm probably about a 9 or a 10 at the moment. That is the difference. So I grew up and loads of people probably relate to this. If you were sick, you had to be physically sick because being mentally sick would is completely different, as frowned upon. So it's like I'm not stressed, but it's a stressful situation and I'm emotionally drained. That's what's making me unfit to work at the moment is the emotions going through. I'm overwhelmed. And if I tried to work and do my normal routine, it would be ruined. It's like last night, for example, I didn't do my bed routine, which is get my breakfast stuff out. So I have my cereal bowl and everything ready. I didn't do that because at the moment the emotions are so drained. So I've got to try and take regulations talking to people, other neurodivergent people as well, that's the big difference between this major life event and previous major life events with us. I've had people like yourself and others who've talked to me and making sure checking in with me. That is the big difference. I didn't have anybody checking in on me or understanding what was happening 20 years ago, 12 years ago, etc. So that's a good thing is taking time out. It's like, if I need to go and have a lie down, I will go and have a lie down just to regulate. So these are all big major changes in how I approach stressful situations. So, other people can face this. If you understand your neurodiversity, you can then face and understand and help yourself when these major life events happen, because we can't hide from them because they happen through your lifetime. And then you get into your 40s, they tend to occur more frequently.
Think that what happens as we get older is that life events don't just become more frequent, they become heavier. The stakes are higher. And I really appreciated what you said about the difference between physical illness and emotional or mental strain, because the distinction still isn't widely understood. And many of us grew up being taught that emotions should be contained, that sadness shouldn't be shown, happiness is the goal, and anything outside of that needs to be hidden. But for us, for neurodivergent people, that often means not only masking our traits, but also try to suppress those emotions we may already struggle to identify or regulate. And it leaves you constantly questioning yourself and wondering what to do with all of that internal noise. And then for many people, with the diagnosis bringing the shift, you start to realize that emotions aren't just good or bad. There is a nuance, there is a range. And suddenly, when you connect with other neurodivergent people, the mask can fall away almost immediately because there is that sense of safety. You feel understood, and not just in how you think, but in how you experience the world. And for me, that understanding has changed how I approach regulation. For example, when I notice that the overwhelm is building and my emotional energy is completely depleted, I know that I need what I now call my amoeba day, which is a day with no decision, no demands, very little thinking. And I know that my executive function just isn't available and I need the time to reset. And that's often hard to explain to people because the response is usually, but just do something that makes you happy. But when you're that dysregulated, there isn't space for happiness yet. First, you need the space to recover, to return to the baseline. And only then you can start thinking about the next steps or what might bring you joy again. And I think that the whole process of regulation is something that many neurotypical people simply haven't had to understand in the same way.
And I'm beginning to understand it with this major life event that's going on at the moment, that I can't do all my normal stuff. Like yesterday, I went and played golf yesterday, got to hole 12. It was raining and I just walked off. I wasn't enjoying it. So I know if I'm not enjoying my golf, I know there's something wrong. So I need to regulate myself. So if you don't find joy in your special interests and stuff, it's an alarm bell. But just one of the other things that helps me regulate as well that I've just remembered is I've been tracking my heart rate for years with my Apple Watch. So what I've found is that I have a range of a heart rate of like a day-to-day heart rate of somewhere between 65 and 75. So if I'm proper chilled, it's at 65. If I'm stressed, it's at 75. So if I get 2 or 3 days of 70 plus, I start to question myself. I'm like, what's going on? And like for the past month or so, my heart rate has been well above 70 every single day. The thing is, I know what's going on. I cannot do much about it because everything's out of my control. And as I said, like there's so much uncertainty. Like this period of that I'm going through at the moment, the level of uncertainty is horrific, but I'm actually managing to regulate myself. I don't think I would have been able to do this today if I hadn't been in the journey that I've been on over the last 18 months. It's if you can find these little early warning signs, because they are out there. Once you start to understand your mind and body, you can pick up on the cues that give you warning to try and avoid burnout. And that's what I'm trying to avoid, is burnout. That's why I'm off work, because my mind just wouldn't focus on it. And I need to focus on me at the moment, because when she hopefully comes out of hospital eventually, she's going to need me in a good mental space. So this is the first time where I've just gone, right, okay, I'm thinking about me. Obviously, I'm thinking about my wife, but you know, that is a massive advance. And I think the one last thing, I did my mental health first aid refresher course in October, and that refresher course made me realize how far I'd come in 3 years. I didn't have any perception of it, because I struggle with perception sometimes and understanding where I am in context of my journey. But I realized I can't believe how far I've come in 3 years. It's amazing.
Stephen, thank you truly for trusting the space with your story and with what you're going through right now. The honesty you've shared, both about your past and your present, isn't easy, and it carries real weight. To close, and for anyone listening who is newly diagnosed or who has always known they're neurodivergent, what's the one thing you wish someone had told you earlier?
Don't be scared. So it's scary and lonely. Try and build up that support network around you of people. Reach out to people on the internet, because that's the biggest thing. Is we're a worldwide community, and the internet has helped bring neurodiversity to the forefront, where historically it would be controlled by institutions and buried in an archive somewhere, without awareness and stuff, because they don't want to face it. But reach out, try and build that network. You're not alone. That is one thing I can guarantee. There are other people like you. So whether you're scared to get diagnosed or scared to admit or scared to explore, don't be afraid, because it will change your life for the better, especially if you suffer with poor mental health. It might actually be the answer to your poor mental health, is that you may be thinking differently, you may be neurodiverse. I get getting asked to take antidepressants and anxiety drugs, and it's like, no, I don't need them, and I'm glad I didn't take them, because that would have changed me. So you can do it, and there are people out there that are willing to listen and help, so don't be scared. Long answer, sorry.
Well, this is amazing. And, it's what we do. We go in deeply. We cannot have a conversation that remains top level. Like, I don't know about you, but I hate chit chats. Like when people ask me, "Oh, what do you think about the weather?" I'm like, "Please tell me your trauma. Like, tell me what's going on in your life. I can talk about the weather, but I can definitely talk about generational trauma."
Well, it's like when somebody says, "How are you?" and I go, "Well, do you want the AuDHD version, or do you just want me to go okay?" And I have to filter for it, because I used to just go, "Yeah, I'm fine." But do you know what? At the moment, no, I'm not fine. I've got a lot going on. But do you know what? Small talk, we didn't really go on about small talk, but that small talk. Ask me about my special interest. I'm all yours, and I'm going to chew your ear off for days. So that might be a good little extra anecdote there, actually. If you've got somebody who's neurodivergent, find out their special interest. That'll be the connection. Because, try and find out their special interest. Try and connect with them on that. And trust me, they will open up.
I absolutely agree. And one of the things that I usually say is that I imagine that we are radios that go on different wavelengths. And the only thing that you really have to do is to tune in with us. The moment that you find our frequency, that's it. You're open to like a symphony of music that changes every day, but it's really interesting.
It's, I like that analogy about the radio tuning into the frequency. I'm going to steal that. Thank you.
Stephen, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, and I hope that everybody that will listen will feel the same benefit that I felt by talking to you. So thank you so much again.
Thank you for inviting me and letting me chat.
The Spacious Brain podcast will come back soon with a new episode and more stories to share. So stay tuned and follow me now, before you forget.